Good morning. I'm assuming you're going to control the slides though. So can we go back to the
Absolutely.
So let me just introduce myself. I'm Distinguished Professor of Public Health and Medical Anthropology in the School of Public Health at the University of Witwatersrand. And I've been in that position for, this is my 7th year, although I was there a few years earlier, and I have a background of 40 years in public health and medical anthropology in Australian universities before choosing to come to South Africa. During that period, I've worked both on infectious and chronic diseases, and I've worked and I still work with the World Health Organization on what we call infectious diseases of poverty. But at the same time, I've also worked on other diseases which wouldn't normally be classified in that, although I think they always are, and that includes water and sanitation and hygiene issues, and including with the World Bank in China some decades ago, which was looking at human waste. And I mean, I maintain that I probably have looked down more different kinds of toilets than any other anthropologist that I know. But you guys are at the forefront of the hardware and the effect of sanitation. And I do see you as at the front line of dealing with water and sanitation related health problems, and that does include, unfortunately now, COVID. May I have the next slide, please? Thank you. I just want to quickly run through these basic things for you because they might be a prompt for you to be thinking about questions you would like answered. And the first one is who is at risk? And what is surprising and startling is that the risk increases absolutely with age. And so there are very few cases worldwide of small children or infants who have been infected. That's really different from things like colds even or other respiratory infections. So most seriously, it doesn't mean that young people don't get COVID, but all of the deaths are correlated with aging and frailty and immune suppression. So if you look at any graph, the older you are and the worse your own health is, the greater you are at risk of very serious disease. And that means that the elderly first, but also tuberculosis, people who have TB, people who have HIV, people who have diabetes, and people who have a cardiac problem or heart disease or have hypertension. And unfortunately, South Africa is at high risk in general because we have the highest HIV rate in the world. We have we have more people living with HIV than anywhere else. We have a very high rate of tuberculosis, often coincident with people having HIV. And we have a very large population with diabetes and cardiovascular disease, most of whom are older also. But the people most at risk are very elderly people. And unfortunately, there's also, for reasons we don't yet understand, a very strong difference by gender. So if you're a man and you've got hypertension and you're over 80, you are much more likely to be seriously ill than a woman of the same age or anybody younger. Okay, the second thing is the warning signs You are confused, but so is the world. However, primarily, very high fever, so sweating and shivering, but really high temperature, and you know what that feels like, and dry coughing, so you're not coughing and coughing up phlegm or anything, it's a dry cough. Those two things are the most predominant signs, and so it is only rarely that people have sore throats, that they might sneeze, they're unlikely to have diarrhea or other things. That does not mean that somebody somewhere has reported those symptoms, but really it is about dry cough and high fever. That of itself just means going to bed and keeping your fever down, and drinking water is important, because someone with a high fever is at risk of dehydration because of sweating. So having water is a really important health thing. And then the only other thing anyone can do for a high fever is take Panado to get the fever down. There is no point in doing anything else because it won't work. It's going to be more confusing rather than less confusing in the coming months, because COVID is anyway a fever, an infection that is spread in cold weather, which is why it was in Europe, or has been in Europe, and began in winter. We are moving towards winter, and as the weather gets colder, people, one, are going to be more likely to have ordinary other kinds of flu and coughs and colds. So the problem with that is that people are going to panic and assume that they've got COVID when they may well be having a cold. So first step is, if you know of anybody, or if you are ill, you need to care for yourself. And I think it's important that we care for ourselves and our family, both emotionally and in terms of our physical health, and take all the precaution we can. And that's the best thing that we can do. And I can answer questions about that later on. The other thing is issues around hand washing. And hand washing has been at the heart of public health protection for as long as we've understood what causes infectious disease. And it's sort of ironic that we now have to explain to people how to wash their hands. And I think most of us have been pretty casual about hand washing, and yet now it is an absolutely critical thing to do, and we can talk about that more. The other thing people have been advised to do is to maintain social distance. It's actually not social distance, and I don't know why that term was invented. Social distance is whether you care for someone, for example, you are socially closer to your friends than you are to other people. So it's physical distance that people are being told in order to minimise risk. And again, there are all kinds of advice, and that includes from all of the experts. No one agrees, and it's really because the virus was only identified on the 31st of December last year. So we're dealing with something that we really don't understand. But keeping a distance means that if someone is talking to you and spit flies from their mouth, it's not going to hit you, right? And the general thing is anything from 1 metre to 2 metres. And I noticed actually things like bank tellers walking backwards away from clients to get a 2 metre space between them. But if you understand what you're doing and why you need distance, that helps you make that decision. And it really is standing right back. Now, again, in some respects, it's not going to be possible to do that. And we cannot say maintain 2 metres physical distance from other people, even if they've, for example, got a cough and cold and live in your household. I mean, if you've got a child, you can't recommend, or if you've got children and you've got a cough, I mean, you have to really take maximum precautions. But a lot of the precautions derive from countries where people live in bigger houses and have got the conditions in which they can best protect their health. And the challenge for us is also that many of our population do live in crowded conditions. Okay, when should you seek medical care? If your breathing is really, really laboured, and that doesn't mean that it's a bit hard, but if you feel that you can't breathe anymore, then you really need to get to a hospital. And it doesn't matter if you've got COVID or not. And in some respects, the reason why people are recommending testing for COVID is really so we know what's going on at a community level with the disease. It doesn't help you necessarily to know you have or haven't. If you have COVID and it's mild, then you stay at home and minimise contact with other people. If you've got COVID and you can't breathe, you get to hospital. And that would be exactly the same public health guidelines that we should be observing if, for example, you have flu. And I guess we've been pretty cavalier about going to work when we've got coughs and colds and flus, and it's only when we're bedridden that we're not turning up at work. And so we're in a new period where now we are taking our health more seriously than before. Okay, next slide, please, Sean. Thank you. I think I said earlier that plumbers were at the front line of the health system for COVID, and it is because the point about COVID is that it is related to hygiene, or rather can be limited through good hygiene. The problem is, of course, that we live in a country that does not have good hygiene facilities, and there are, frankly, not enough taps in very poor communities, and taps don't always work, and we're also still living with the effect of drought. So we've got multiple problems. The other point is, and I think it's something for you all to be thinking about, that your contribution to public health is critical, and it's not just COVID, it's other kinds of health conditions, including waterborne diseases of all kinds and fecal diseases and other diseases that relate to hygiene and sanitation. And so my own concern is really what's happening in informal settlements and the urgent need for government to quickly improve infrastructure and to make sure that there are accessible water, because if someone is sick, they're not going to be carrying 5-litre jars of water across 2 or 3 kilometres. And so that's the real serious challenge here. Next slide, please, Sean. Right. So because hand washing is at the heart of limiting the virus, together with limiting contact, which would lead to someone having somebody else cough in their face, for example, unintentionally or not. You know, there are difficulties when there are drippy taps, or there aren't enough taps, or when there isn't much water, or if people if there is a real challenge around water supply, as is true in cases such as Mukunda still. You know, I mean, if you're on a really, really tight water restrictions, how do you get around this? Now, one of the things that I just want to talk about briefly before I hand over to you for your questions is how do you wash if you don't have much water? And the best advice that's coming out is simply wash with soap and water, nothing else. So you don't need fancy sanitizers, which most people can't afford anyway, and you don't need lots of water. And the reason you use soap is because it will help clean the surface of your hands. And the other thing related to that is to keep clean things like door handles and so on. Now, for hand washing, which is critical, there are ways to provide, and it's probably only what you can do, but if someone asks you, then it's advice you can share, which is that you don't need much water, but if you've got soap, what you need to do is wet your hands, but you don't have to put them under running water, right? You've got wet hands, then rub them with soap and rub your hands for a good period. So the common time that I've seen is 2 happy birthday songs. So if you sing happy birthday to you twice around, you've scrubbed your hands enough with soap, and what you're making is a good lather, and you're rubbing the surface of your hands as well, and all sides and between your fingers and everything else. Then a little bit of water will wash off that lather. So it doesn't have to be a huge amount of water. And what I've seen is a suggestion that you have like a 2-litre bottle of water, and put the water in an old Coca-Cola container, put the lid on and just punch a little hole, and then tip it so you've got a tiny bit of water in your hands and dripping water to wash off the soap. And so in places where people don't have enough water, that seems to me to be a really clever way to stretch water resources, especially when people need, if they can drink the water, they need water to drink, because drinking water is important if you have a virus and a fever. And people need water for other purposes. The other thing is, and I think it's an important thing again to share with people, that if you know people who really have problems with water, the water can be reused for rinsing off, as long as it's not dirty water like from your hands. But if you use clean water you've got clean water and you've bathed, you can still use that for hand washing. So you don't have to throw out water, in the same way that people learn, if they've got flush toilets, to keep a bucket and use that water rather than to flush. But in thinking about that, it occurred to me, if you wash fruit or vegetables in water, or even if you boil vegetables in water, then there's nothing wrong with that water. That water is water that you then is covering stuff that you put in your mouth. So one could keep that water and use that for hand washing purposes, or use that to then wash the surfaces of space like cupboard handles and door handles and so on. So it is, I mean, I think it's a real challenge, and you know, we've having to always put forward hygiene is a really hard thing for people to get used to, but it's critical to keep down what is at present a relatively low numbers of people who are sick, or who we know to be sick. Okay, Sean, would you like to move the next slide, which I think is about questions, and then it's over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Professor. The first question I have got here from the audience reads, my understanding is that dust masks are not as effective as believed. Do you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, sure. A mask is going to be reasonably effective if you have a cough, because it will absorb any spit with the virus in it, right? So it's protecting other people. It won't necessarily protect you from getting, it might stop you getting other people's spit on your face, but basically the virus is airborne, so it's more likely to be in the air, which is why then physical distance from other people becomes important. Okay, but the best advice is don't wear masks for the sake of wearing a mask because you think it will protect you. What you're then doing is buying a mask that might be useful for other people, but ordinary common and garden masks, as in, you know, the ones that just the scrim across your mouth and looped over your ears, are almost impossible to buy anyway. And when last seen, they were selling for 75 Rand, not 20 Rand. It's not worth the money. It's much more important to hand wash and stand away from people to protect yourself from them and them from you. Okay,
Alright, perfect.
that's different from industrial masks or surgical masks and so on, which provide more protection. And I am really focusing on the everyday use of masks. It's symbolically important, but of course it also creates a sense of anxiety. Why is this person wearing a mask? Are they sick? So, you know, that's not necessarily the best thing either.
All right, perfect. The next question and I've got reads, I've got a client that is currently under quarantine in his house. He wants me to come and do a geyser installation.
Well,
kan ek weier?
Yeah, and the question is, I mean, if he's in quarantine, I mean, the person might be in quarantine because they've travelled. So it doesn't mean that they've got the virus at all. The real issue is if they're in, well, geyser you're using to mean what? I mean, you don't even have to be in the same room as somebody to install something. And so it's really, I mean, and it may well be that I mean, one thing that's important is that we cannot all stop working because we're frightened. And if we have jobs, then we should stay in them, providing we're not risking ourselves. And the other thing is the importance of plumbers in maintaining water and sanitation in this country. It's so critical. So the real answer to that is that's a job, that's terrific. Just don't shake the hands of the person, keep your physical distance of them. They don't have to be in the same room. They should not be in the same room as you when you're working. Right? So it's about then making it very, very clear what the conditions are. You will come providing they show you where they want you to work and isolate themselves from you in another room. Okay, next question.
All right. The next question reads, apart from normal hand wash with soap and water, will diluted Dettol spray also be just as efficient as the infamous sanitizer spray is now out of stock throughout the country? All right, I have got a similar question to this down further in the questions, which reads, is normal soap okay, or do I need something special?
No, normal soap is the best thing because it's causing, you can get a lather up and you can, and it's somewhat abrasive, so it's going to get rid of more surface dirt and everything from your hands as well. Everybody is using this spray, but if you look at what people are doing, like spray, wipe, and that's done. And I don't think that's having a huge effect at all. It's making money for people who produce the spray when you can get it now. But soap and a little bit of water will do as well. If I can just make a point about that, where water is really scarce, if you've got really dirty hands, which you might as plumbers, then you can get all of the surface dirt and grime off with sand. So if you've got a sandy environment, what the sand is an abrasive. So, or you know, dirt if it's clean dirt. But if you've got sand, then rub your hands really thoroughly to get off all of the surface grime, so you're not wasting soap and water, and then really lather up and really use soap. Back to
Perfect.
you,
And then
Sean.
just back to that first part, would diluted Dettol spray be just as effective?
Well, diluted Dettol spray is just going to spray some infectant on the surface. It's not going to really rub off any dirt, and I mean it will be effective to some extent. But I just, I'm just not comfy about saying to people, yes, use the spray. I think it has as much symbolic value as practical value, and I really want to go back to wash your hands properly rather than go spray and keep on going. And do not put your hands in your mouth or around your eyes, because that's the whole issue. It's about clean hands, but avoiding spreading germs. And the extraordinary thing is when you think about that and then realise what you're doing. So, I mean, we all the time are touching our face, and if you suddenly become self-conscious and you realise how often you use your fingers to wipe your eyes and wipe your mouth and so on, and that needs to be minimised, and certainly if you've got dirty hands. So again, it's all about everyday hygiene, not using special things.
All right, perfect. The next question reads, how long can the virus last on metal?
That's a very good question. I don't know. It lasts on different surfaces for different periods of time, and I'll get back to you in a moment about that, because I know that it lasts for a different period on metal. Okay, I can tell you this. Right, it lasts on for 24 hours on cardboard and 2 to 3 days on plastic and stainless steel, and 4 hours on copper. So it depends on what the metal is, doesn't it, as to how long it lasts. Okay, and that, I mean, just to tell you, I mean, that's from the National Institutes of Health. So that's a website that I'm really confident in. But it's detectable in aerosols for up to 3 hours, for up to 4 hours in copper, 24 on cardboard, 2 to 3 days on plastic and stainless steel, which is why people say wipe your door, clean your doors and door handles and things like that, and taps, clean your taps. And for cleaning there, the answer is to make a thin household bleach and water solution will work as well as anything, and household bleach solution is also the cheapest. So again, don't buy fancy products. Back to you, Sean.
All right, perfect. The next question I've got for you reads, should I be worried if I suffer from asthma?
You should be careful if you suffer for asthma, because you're already vulnerable to anything that affects your breathing. And it impacts on your immunity. So don't get overly worried, but be really cautious. And I think, we're worried about this virus because we don't understand it. It hasn't been around before. It's increasing at a terrifying rate. But every day we're in contact with people who have TB, and we don't leave the house thinking, oh my God, what if someone walks past me with TB, right? And that also affects breathing. So if you have a condition like asthma and you get problems with breathing, first of all, you may have a preventer or a nebulizer and so on. But if it gets really hard, then you just have to get to hospital and get help with oxygen. And I have to say that we're really working on the hop insofar as no information is out yet really around the particular vulnerabilities of different people. So it's all very broad brushstroke, but any any health problem that affects your breathing makes you as vulnerable as if you had hypertension or diabetes or cardiovascular disease, okay? So it's one of the group of conditions that impact on immunity and make you vulnerable. Sean, back to you again.
All right, perfect. The next question is just a bit of a clarification. You said it can survive 3 to 4 hours in an aerosol. So does that mean it is airborne?
It is airborne. It is airborne, and that's why the whole point about being physically distant from someone and not coughing at them. You know, it floats around, and it doesn't float a long way. But if someone is infected and they're talking and they spit, the spit floats into the air and lands on the surface, and the virus is there, or it hits your skin. So that's what you're watching for.
All right, perfect. The next question I've got reads, if the virus can live outside the body for up to 3 days, is that, if that's correct, if a bulk water supply employee, for example, a council employee, were to sneeze or spit into a water storage tank, and the water were to go through the supply and someone drinks it, is there a chance they get infected?
No, it does not survive in water. That's why washing your hands is so important. It's the soap, but it's also the water. It is an airborne infection, not a waterborne infection.
Right,
Which
perfect.
is not
The next question.
Not to encourage people to spit into the community water supply, please. Back to you, Sean.
All right, perfect. The next question I've got for you reads, I work on a building site where the building uses 5 allocated long drop toilets. Is there a chance that I get the virus when using these toilets?
Well, not normally at all, but if someone had the virus and if the virus was on the door handle when you went in to use the toilet, then you may have a virus on your hand. If you touch the toilet seat, I mean, it's not going to come from one person's bottom to the next person's bottom, right? This is airborne. So it'll be surfaces that you touch. Now, hopefully, on site, there is a place where you can wash your hands after going to the toilet. That's what's important, right? So it goes back to hand washing. Toilets themselves present no risk at all, other than the ordinary risk of other kinds of interaction. So you shouldn't worry about that, but you really must wash your hands, as you must in any case, right? Thank you. Sean.
All right, the next question I've got here reads, how long does it take for symptoms to show from first contact with someone who has the COVID-19 virus?
Oh dear. And this is one of the really, really big unknowns and confusions, because they've been through anything from a few days to a few weeks. So we really don't know. And the same is true around how long it lasts, because, you know, people have been sick for up to 8 weeks, which is why we still have such a high rate of cases that are active in even China, even though there's virtually no transmission. But it could be, I mean, you know, the standard is 7 to 14 days, and that's why people who might have been exposed are asked to be in isolation for 2 weeks. And I think, you know, that as far as we can tell, if they're in isolation for 2 weeks, then they're almost assured to not be infected, actually.
All right, the next question I've got here, it's very, very similar to some other ones, so I'm going to change it a little bit. It reads, is it true that temperatures over 27 degrees Celsius kills the virus? And then if not, is there a temperature where the virus will die, i.e. in hot water cylinders due to infected water coming in?
Right.
Well, obviously it's not.
Yeah, 27 degrees is not very warm water, right? Our body temperature is more than that. So it's not going to do anything to the virus at all. However, I mean, if you're trying to sterilize something, for example, with some thin bleach, then 50 degrees is fine. So it doesn't have to be boiling water. I mean, 50 degrees is not all that hot. Certainly if you from the Northern Cape at the height of summer, or in my case, originally from Australia in the height of summer. So the, I mean, the real answer is it does have to be hotter than 27. And listen, I do want to reiterate the symptoms appear really 2 to 14 days after exposure, and 14 days is the absolute outside from exposure. But then if you were infected, then it could continue for up to 6 weeks after that. Okay, back to you again, Sean.
All right, perfect. The next question I've got here reads, how often should you be washing your hands?
It's like a piece of string, isn't it? How often is frequent? 1, every time you go to the bathroom. 2, before you're eating, and then after eating. I mean, not that eating itself is going to cause a virus, but just clean your hands anyway. But before you eat, or before you prepare food, and bathroom. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be every 5 minutes or something, just in case. So it's really about reinforcing what all of us ought to do anyway, and most of us don't do most of the time.
Right, perfect. The next question I've got reads, how vital would you say the plumber's role in the public health sector with reference to the coronavirus?
Absolutely vital, and it's also vital in terms of diarrheal disease, which is still one of the major killers in the world for young children. It's absolutely vital for the prevention of previous very serious epidemics like for cholera and so on. And right now, as I've already said, you people are the frontline health workers.
Right, perfect. The next question I've got reads, if I am sick and I do stay at home and get better after time, may I return to work when I'm feeling better, or must I get tested? And a similar question to that reads, after how long after feeling well can I return to work?
That's a very good point. Because my own inclination would be to say after feeling well, if it was coronavirus, you may want to have to take 2 weeks off. But look, what testing will do is confirm if it's coronavirus or not. So then it would be managed differently. So if it's mild, actually, you stay home. I mean, sorry, the message that I've got here, and I'm just again looking at a health site, is stay home for 7 days from when your symptoms started, and then end isolation. But all household members who remain well must not leave the house for 14 days in case they're infected. So that implies to me that once you're infected, you're less then there's a sort of a decline in which you're going to infect other people. But I think we're getting more and more information about what to do, and staying at home for at least 7 days makes great sense. And you know, rather than simply don't just turn up. If you can breathe and it's a mild infection, then you don't need to go to the hospital. You just need to be resting as much as possible, taking Panadol if you've got a high fever, drinking water, and washing your hands. So it is around just not going back on the first day after you feel sick. Or after you start feeling better, I mean.
Perfect.
I'll pull up and send to you, Sean, some basic advice about how long to stay at home and when to end self-isolation, because the reliable advice is not too bad. You know, but I've got a very clear website in front of me now. Why you stay at home is not partly it's so that you rest, but it's also to not spread it to other people like friends or the wider community, and particularly not to spread it for people who are at high risk because of their own low immunity. Okay.
All right. The next question I've got is very similar to another. So the first one reads, how long could this epidemic last? And then the second one is, how long do you think until the government can get it under control?
It's almost the same question, isn't it? We don't know how long it's going to last, because at present, I mean, it's rising so rapidly now every day that it's clearly going to continue for some time. I think the one thing to look at is that there's virtually no transmission in China now, and I think there was reported, and there was, I think, no transmission last night. I mean, you know, the report that came through this morning, and what that means is that it has lasted in China for 11 weeks. So South Africa, really, it was only 10 days ago or so, we had about 6 cases. So it's increased phenomenally rapidly here, but slower than elsewhere, and the government acted much earlier than it was acted in other places, right? So if we have an increase, I think we are still looking at a couple of months at least. And I do think that we have to, before the virus sort of peters out and before there's no more transmission. But beyond that, there are many countries in the world where there is very little virus so far, and there may continue to be viral transmission there, and particularly, you know, in changes in condition. So, I mean, we're learning as we go along, I'm afraid. But we are in it for the long haul. It's not going to be all resolved by next week.
All right, perfect. The next question reads, after this corona emergency, do you think that the government should be more stringent in applying plumbing standards, as sewers could be a highway for many different airborne viruses?
Well, airborne viruses, fecal-borne viruses, and waterborne viruses and bacteria, and plumbing has always been important for that. And so absolutely, I mean, this is for poorer countries and countries where there are poor populations with inadequate supplies of water and poor plumbing, then this is a real wake-up call. And you know, the fact is that countries in Europe and America, where one might think that basic standards were better, are struggling with this disease. And if they're struggling, you know, the concern is, well, what about in places where there is really, really poor sanitation? And we do have to clean up our sanitation. And therefore there needs to be more investment in sanitation. This is a long haul, and it's really for professional associations to begin to lobby, but there needs to be more training and more investment in making sure that we have got reliable sanitation, reliable water supplies, less pollution in our water.
All right, thank you very much. The next question I've got here reads, with being in the plumbing industry, if we are called out to a blocked sewage system besides the obvious, can we take any additional measures to protect ourselves?
No, it's the same measure, which is keeping physical distance. And I mean, you take standard measures anyway when you're working with sewage. And so doing that makes absolute sense. And then the rest of it is the standard hygiene practices, or ramp them up, and don't go around hugging the people who you're helping.
All right, thank you. The next question reads, can plumbers request that their clients disclose that they have COVID-19? As with people being possibly kept in isolation, it could be put an obvious strain on their plumbing.
I don't think it'll put a strain on their plumbing, but, you know, because it's not as if they've got diarrheal disease and or are blocking up the system. Look, I mean, you can ask, and the question I think you have to ask is, before you go out to a call, do you ask them if they have tuberculosis? And if the answer is no, then I think, you know, the same applies, and that what you have to do is, but I mean, you can certainly say, are you in isolation? Because if that's the case, I need you to keep physical distance. And I do think that people understand, because we're talking about it so much on radio and television and everything else, people will understand. They're unlikely to say, hello, can you please come and fix the tap? I have got COVID virus. And I also think that the people you don't know, you keep physical distance from anyway, and you can, and people could, I mean, I don't think it would hurt to say, I'm happy to come out, I'm happy to fix this. However, in order to reduce any risk of infection, we need to keep physical distance, and then put 2 meters rather than less between you and the other person. That just seems to me like common sense. And if you're working like unblocking a toilet, then don't be shut in the toilet with another person while they show you how the toilet flushes or doesn't flush. You keep spaces open, because enclosed spaces will transmit airborne virus more easily than if there are open windows and air going through. Back to you, Sean.
All right, the next question I've got here reads, I asked a medical practitioner a bit about the virus, and he also advised that we should stay away from areas that are constantly running air cons and HVAC systems. Are viruses, or as viruses, can sit on top of the filters and get blown onto people passing by? What is your comment on this?
Chris, have you got any comment on that one?
Yeah, so actually it comes back to air purifiers. When we take a look at air cons, things like that, the filters need to be hygienically cleaned quite often, and this is in accordance with your manufacturer standards. So generally, somebody is not coughing or spitting at a high rate. It's always eye level, shoulder level, and then it starts filtering down to the ground, whereas air cons generally are sitting up on top of the roof. So it is generally pumping in fresh air, as long as your aircon is set on a fresh air setting, so that it pumps in the cold air and the fresh air from outside. So generally this is of a concern to many, but as we mentioned earlier, and obviously the professor, you've answered that already, to say that it does tend to be in the air for some sort of time, but only after a meter or two, then it starts dissipating or falling to the ground. with air cons being a lot higher, you've got a less chance of it actually sitting on those filters. Thanks, Sean.
Right, 100%. The next question / comment I've got here for you reads, I would like to know if you touch the tap to run the water and then wash your hands and close the tap, aren't you just transferring the germs back onto you?
It's one of those little dilemmas, isn't it? One, you may want to have the tap wiped, and you may want to have a tissue or something to do that, or if you can close a tap with your elbow, which is true in public places. I think that's why the recommendation is to make sure that you constantly clean, and constantly meaning at least once a day, I would think, things like taps and door handles and so on. I mean, I don't, you know, it's hard to know how much work we have to do on top of ordinary hygiene, and there is of course a risk, but you know, there are ways to minimise that risk, and having hands washed is the best possible thing in keeping surfaces clean. So it's ramping up basic hygiene, but not getting so anxious about it that all you're doing is washing your hands. And washing your hands, turning the tap off, and then realising you've touched the tap and turning it back on and washing your hands again.
All right, okay. Perfect. The next question that I've got for you reads, if you have the virus, will staying home and drinking enough water be enough to help?
That other than keeping your temperature down, which might be from taking a basic, what's called an antipyretic and anti-fever medication which you can buy over the counter, that's all you can do. And so, and rest is a good way to deal with any virus. So, I mean, it's what we say. I mean, plenty of fluids and rest. And fluids, I mean, you know, the reason why many people end up in hospital, including with flu, and remember, more people die in the world from flu than do from this particular virus. People die from flu, not because of the virus itself, but because they've had fever and they're dehydrated and they don't feel like drinking, and they're too weak to get up and get something to drink, and then they're in serious trouble and they need to be put on a drip. Sean, back to you.
Perfect. The next question reads, money goes from hand to hand. Is it a real risk to get infected?
Money goes from hand to hand. That's a really good question, isn't it? Because the virus will live on paper. Yes, it is a risk, and then after handling money, you would want to wash your hands. Remember, remember that there are very few people at present in South Africa, so again, it's not about getting overly anxious.
All right, perfect. The next question reads, if we go to the gym and we keep using hand sanitizer, will that be safe?
Safe. I mean, it's one way of minimising the infection. And remember, I mean, you're touching things that other people have touched all the time in the gym, so you're hanging on to things. So you know, you picking up weights or holding onto the handle of a cross trainer or something like that. But and the sanitizer will help when you leave, get a bit, but really, I mean, you're better off if you're going to the gym, And increasingly people are saying don't go to the gym, and certainly you're not going to go to classes anymore. So if you're at the gym, you're keeping a distance from someone, then go into the restroom and wash your hands thoroughly with soap and water before you leave the gym, and then go through using your elbow or your hip to push open the turntable. And I mean, just back on the point about money, money's always covered with germs. You know, it's probably got more germs on it than anything else. So if you've got hands that aren't particularly clean, and then you're coughing and you're sneezing on your hands and then sharing money, then you're going to get the germs that are on the money. Okay.
That's 100%. The next question I've got here reads, please, or is there any truth to the rumor going around that the coronavirus affects certain races and not others?
No, absolutely not. That's completely incorrect. The point is this, that it has spread in the global north and in China because it was winter. It's a virus that lives in colder weather. And so we have all been protected because we've been in summer. And that's why now we're beginning to see some community transmission in lots of countries. The colder it gets, the more likely people are going to get infected. And then we have an added problem because of problems with water and sanitation supplies and infrastructure that hasn't been well maintained, right? That's the risk. However, because quality of sanitation and hygiene and housing and capacity to isolation is associated with class, which is associated with race as a result of our particular history, it might look like increasingly that there will be a pattern. But all that does is expose who is poorest in the country.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. I think the next question would be best for Steve to answer. So Steve, the question reads, we are seeing overseas that the lockdowns and complete shutdowns of cities. In light of the comment that plumbers are at the forefront of health and hygiene, how are we supposed to react to plumbing calls in this case?
Sean, I think in terms of what we've heard this morning from the professor and what we've heard from Chris in terms of, I think we've just got to up our awareness. I think we've got to go back to training. My personal, communication with people is business as normal. I think we've got to understand, as the professor said, nothing has been shut down as yet. I think we've got all of these precautions to take. We need to go back into training. We need to be more vigilant. We need to start, upping our game in terms of that. So right now, there's nothing currently that's saying that, plumbing will stop and businesses are closing and everything. I don't think we've got to that stage yet. So I think, the consensus coming from us and everywhere else, it is business as normal. But I think at the forefront is exactly what we've discussed this morning, going back to what Chris has been doing, creating that awareness, protecting ourselves, ensuring that we up our training in terms of these discussions today, and just taking adequate precautions and also applying logic. I think that's one of the things I discussed yesterday, is that, let's not take this thing as a, it's just not going to happen to me. I think we need to realize that we have got a problem and we really need to up our game, apply logic, and be honest with each other and make sure that we do the best that we can in terms of going to people's places and being exposed. So it goes back to what Chris and the professor are saying. Let's just make sure that we take all necessary precautions to ensure that we've done the best that we can. But until such time as things change, and I think Chris and Professor, but right now those precautions are there, and we're not at a stage now where cities or towns or whatever have been isolated, etc., etc. I don't know what they're doing in other countries in terms of essential services, but maybe that's something we need to look at, Chris, in terms of what possibly did happen there from an IOPSA point of view. But right now, business as usual, but let's just be very vigilant in terms of what we're doing. And at the same time, logic, if you believe you're going into a place and you've got somebody coughing and spluttering, you have the right and the decision to say no. I think that's really where it needs to be, in my opinion.
All right, perfect. Thanks so much, Steve. The next question I have got here, Professor, reads, what is the cause of the coronavirus?
It is a virus. So the virus is in the environment. We don't know how it got there. There've always been coronaviruses around. So it's just one of many, many, many different kinds of microbes in the environment. And the viruses are very, very small microbes. And normally, I mean, we live with both bacteria and viruses all the time. And, you know, our bodies are covered with bacteria and it doesn't cause anything. We don't know what the trigger was that caused this particular virus, and that's why it's called a novel coronavirus, meaning it's new. No one had seen this particular coronavirus before. And so in that respect, we don't know. What you're asking is what causes the disease or infection, and that's because the virus is in the body and then is airborne, so it floats around in the air. It doesn't mean that and then sits on surfaces, but the virus, which lots of other viruses and bacteria do too.
All right.
Okay.
With the airborne nature of the virus, is it possible for it to sit on sewage and on food? So that's a couple of the questions we have got, Chestel.
Yeah. Yes, but it's sitting on sewage is not going to affect well, if you're a plumber, you may get sewage on your hands, but then you're going to wash your hands very thoroughly, right? And I don't think that it's, I mean, if you're preparing food and you have COVID, then you're not going to share it with anyone else. And I think that the real issue is around maintaining really good hygiene in the home.
All right, perfect.
Right.
The next question.
Sorry, if I can just say, it's, you know, it's not going to affect for example, food in the supply chain. You know, we're not going to be, and it's not going to affect us that way because it is around direct transmission, and if food is cooked, then that's also going to reduce any contamination of food. So people are certainly concerned that coronavirus can be transmitted by food with the virus sitting on the food, but there's absolutely no evidence of that from the most important and reliable organisations. So, you know, transmission could be if a person is infected, handles the food with dirty hands, and then someone eats the food. That's the only mechanism. All right. Thanks, Sean.
Right, perfect. The next question I have got here reads, is it true that they say you must not take ibuprofen like fever meds? Is this dangerous?
No, I wouldn't have thought so, but I mean, I can check that, but I think the point about it is absolutely don't take any medication. WHO is recommending not taking ibuprofen. Let me see why, and I'll explain it to you. Because it's an anti-inflammatory drug, not an anti-fever drug, and it could worsen the infection. Right? So yes, sorry, that's absolutely true. Whoever asked that question beat me to it. So the answer is take Panadol or any other kind of paracetamol, because that will be useful in dealing with an infection, but do not take an anti-inflammatory drug. And if you need an anti-inflammatory drug for something else, then you have to consult a doctor. Okay.
All right. The next question I've got for you reads, specifically to domestos, would this be efficient to wash your hands with?
Ew. I mean, domestos is really a domestic bleach, right? So do you want to keep on bleaching your hands? I think, you know, soap and water is what is recommended. Domestos will certainly clean surfaces in a house, and that's a really good thing. But if you don't, I mean, we don't wash our hands normally with bleach, we don't need to go to that measure and then end up at the risk of getting infections from, you know, causing lesions on our hands. I mean, you know, it's an abrasive, but it works. It's a perfect thing to work on door handles and, you know, and so on, or surfaces of housing. But then again, so is thin bleach. So whatever is affordable and available for cleaning. But don't use heavy duty cleaners on your hands. That's not necessary.
All right, perfect. The next question I've got here reads, if you have a dry cough but no temperature, could you have COVID-19? And I think a good way to expand on this question is, what is the differences in the symptoms that people are actually displaying? Does everybody have a dry cough, or does everybody get a fever?
Well, that's the dilemma, isn't it? Because the answer is no, that there is a variety of symptoms from very mild to severe. So the mild is going to, well, fever, cough, and then shortness of breath are the most common symptoms. But some people have reported sore throat, some people have reported runny noses, some people have reported other kinds of symptoms, so that the original advice was you only have those and you don't have any other symptom at all. And then you get one person who says, well, I had X or Y, and then you have to go back to thinking about it. But the prime, and then also some of those may not be present. So somebody may not have a fever, but just have a cough and shortness of breath, and somebody might have some other kind of difficulty. The emergency signs are really difficulty breathing or shortness of breath, so that if you have a fever and a cough, just stay home and care for yourself. But if you are having difficulty breathing, or are breathing very frequently, or and you feel pressure in the chest, which you would feel pressure or pain if you had a chest infection from a cold, if you've ever had that, you know that if you've got something like pneumonia or bronchitis or something, that you get pain in your chest, that's the sign of a chest infection. And if you have that as well, and or if you start getting confused, then that's an emergency. And or if you're beginning to look very bluish in the face, then that's an emergency too. So, I mean, really, you know, if you can't breathe and you're getting pain in your chest, at the very least, you've got bronchitis, and it may not be COVID, but you need to get emergency medical attention. If it's cough and fever, even if it's not COVID, you need to take precaution. And if it is COVID, you can be diagnosed. But my own advice would be, in the short term, stay at home and self-isolate, and don't put anybody else at risk. Sean?
All right, the next question reads, is the alcohol content in sanitizer important?
No, that's why soaps is good. Back to you.
Right, perfect. The next question reads, please speak a bit about the treatments available for the infected person.
Sorry. The dilemma with COVID, which is why we're seeing it escalating so much, is that there is no treatment yet other than treating the symptom. So people who do end up with severe chest infection need to go on hospital to go on a ventilator to help them breathe. But there is we do not have a way of treating the virus, and that's why it's frightened people. Remember that we don't have any way of treating a common cold because it's a virus that cannot be treated. Almost all flus are treated for the symptoms only. The only difference between COVID and flus really is that as new seasonal flus emerge, and that includes other kinds of viruses, then there are available vaccinations, and that's why there's always a drive around this time of year for people to get their flu shots. Back to you. I mean, people are working on developing both treatment and vaccinations now, but there's nothing yet available. And so again, the only thing to be watched at is to make sure that you avoid risk and maintain hygiene. Sean?
All right, perfect. The next question reads, is preventative testing allowed?
I really don't see the value. I mean, what would preventive testing do? It's not going to prevent you getting COVID virus. All it's going to tell you is if right now you do or do not have it. But if you've got no symptoms at all, then you don't have it. And going to get tested for something you don't have, which is always going to have symptoms, is going to draw down on the health system and could lead to us running out of test kits. So don't do it. Sean?
All right. The next question reads, what was the origin of this? Because I think a lot of people have heard that it did come from an animal. Because I have got another question here which reads, if my dog comes into contact with a person with corona, can I then get infected from my dog?
No, you can't. There's no animal transmission that we know of, and as I explained earlier, we really don't know what caused COVID. It started in and around the live animal markets in Wuhan in China, but that could be totally a coincidence. Back to you. And as I said, I mean, viruses of different kinds live in the world all of the time. It's just that this is a new one that nobody has seen that is particularly lethal.
Right, perfect. The next question reads, why is the global recovery rate so low compared to China, who has over 70,000 recovered cases?
Well, China had it before the rest of the world. When China went into lockdown in January, there were some cases in China, and they may not all be reported, remember. So they're the cases that have been reported. And we know the virus can, if someone is infected, they could have the virus for 6 weeks. You know, if they're really sick, it's going to stretch out. It's not a virus that you have for 2 days and then you're better. So we will begin to see, I hope, and expect a slowdown of cases in countries over time. So, but at the same time, it's going to spread elsewhere. So it's not as if, you know, I mean, I think it's still the country that's most worrying at present is Italy, because it's still rapidly increasing. And despite some lockdown, but the lockdown in Italy only happened really about a week ago, and it takes a long time to intervene. And Italy has a lot of vulnerable people, and that also makes it difficult. Sean?
All right, perfect. The next question reads, if you are lucky enough to get, or if you're lucky enough to survive COVID-19, is it possible for you to get it again?
Right. One, you're not going to be lucky enough to survive COVID because the case fatality rate is not that high. It's not like Ebola virus. So, you know, the likelihood is that if you were unlucky to be infected, you would survive it. And I think, you know, we have to keep that in mind. Otherwise, we're all going to be paralyzed with fear, right? Now, the second part is that, one, we don't know, but there is virtually no evidence at all of reinfection. There have been a couple of reports worldwide of possible reinfection, but bear in mind that we now have nearly 220,000 cases worldwide, and almost every one of them are new cases. So the likelihood of reinfection is very low. What we don't know yet, because it's so new to us, is whether people then develop immunity or in the long term, or what effect it has on the immune system. So what it does mean is that I mean, I personally wouldn't think, you know, if I had mild COVID virus, I wouldn't think right now I can go and minister. And it's a little bit like measles and chickenpox and all of those viruses, that most people are immune or have semi-immunity after they've had the infection, but it is not 100% guarantee. Okay.
Right, perfect. Thanks so much, Professor. We are getting into the last couple of questions here. Just the next question, I think, for Chris reads, when we open a manhole, what is the first thing we should do as we are then being bombarded by airborne fumes?
Thanks very much, Sean. A very good question. And obviously it goes back to what the professor spoke about on the sewers, fecal matter, knowing that it is an airborne disease and not a waterborne disease. But we are protecting ourselves from other types of pathogens, biological hazards in any case when working in sewers, opening up manholes. In other words, you are already trying to protect yourself from viruses that are sometimes even more severe, E. coli, Ebola, things like that, that should be passing through our sewer system. And if you are opening up these manholes, you're exposing yourself not just to the potential exposure of COVID, but to other biological hazards as well. Now, according to the Occupational Health and Safety Act, you need to already take reasonable and practical measures to protect yourself. So ensuring you've got a safe method of working, how are you going to do that? And it's by protecting your team, not only on the training side and the education of what dangers they're going to find, but the handling of such substances, and then obviously the PPE that we are using. And just as a note on that, when opening up these manholes, the protection should come in before and not after we are already exposed. So please make sure these safe methods or safe systems of work are already in place in your company before even getting to that manhole. On the note of PPE, I don't know if it has been asked already, but if your PPE touches something that is infected, please remember it still stays on your gloves. Your gloves do protect your hands, but if you are touching your face and other things with those gloves, you are then transmitting it from one place to another. So it's very important to keep our PPE hygienically clean as well. Make sure that those things are cleaned before and after using them. And then do not touch your face, mouth, or eyes with the gloves that you have on. It's not a barrier for your face or your hands. It is only a barrier against actually touching something that is infected. But these things also need to be kept clean. Thanks, Sean.
All right, perfect. The next question I have got here reads, can you be a carrier and not know it?
Yes, insofar as you may be infected and haven't shown signs, and that's why people who have been in contact with other people are asked to go into quarantine or self-isolation, even if they're not sick.
Right, perfect.
Yeah,
And
but it
then,
is about contact. And you know, the challenge is in a very crowded environment where you don't know who's infected or not and who you're in contact with, and that's why we've now prohibited any large gatherings of people and closed classes and closed schools. So we're absolutely actively reducing the risk of infection all the time.
right, perfect. And then just for, what does COVID-19 stand for, or is it just a designation?
No, it stands for coronavirus disease. So it's just taken the first words from CO and VI and then D for disease, okay? It could have been called COVIDy and we'd have kept the I from disease, but you know, it just works out that way. So it's COVID, and then 19 is because it first appeared in 2019.
All right, perfect. And then the last question I have got here on my list reads, what is the total deaths worldwide?
Look, the total deaths worldwide is changing every minute, and I use a information site for that which is higher than some of the other sites, but I use it because, one, it gives me because lots of things you know, not everything is reported right, but the death rate does appear using the particular information system I use. It's now 8,970, and it's going up all the time. And the cumulative cases, meaning every case, including recoveries, is now approaching 220,000 cases. And it's still largely being transmitted and going up in Europe. But as I said earlier, it appears that it's slowing down a bit in some places, like the United Kingdom is still pretty low. So, you know, it's very uneven in its distribution and its impact, even in environments where other conditions are ideal for its transmission. And in a global sense, the number of deaths are much, much lower than deaths from tuberculosis or other things. I mean, about 300 or more people die every day from tuberculosis, or did last time I saw figures in South Africa. And people die from pneumonia all the time, not from COVID, but for other viruses. But you know, this is different because it can't be treated, and we're working to head it off. And if people weren't taking measures to prevent it, then there would be a terrible death rate. But the reality is that the public health measures that have been introduced are working very well relative to what could happen.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Doctor or Professor. I do apologize. That is all of the questions I have got for you this morning. Is there anything you would like to say before we end off the session?
Thank you for keeping our taps and sewage systems going, because it is critical. And please wash your hands and don't cough on anyone. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Thanks so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for this morning session. I am going to go ahead and end it off now. Guys, this session was recorded and it will be up on the PIRB, on the IOPSA's YouTube channel and on App Plumber. by the end of today. It will most probably be on by 12, but this will be a long one to edit. So it will be up by the end of today, guys. If you do want to come back at any point, just to go ahead and refresh, or maybe send the links to anybody that needs to know, guys. Right. Thank you very much, Professor. I do think that you have made a huge difference this morning, just based on the amount of questions we had. I do really think it was a very, very great, beneficial session. All right,
Thank
but
you.
ladies and gentlemen, I am going to go ahead and end it off now. Thanks so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day, guys.